All right, good day everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Spark Your Fire. I'm your host, David Shih, and here today with me is Steve Ash from PropertyStrats. Steve, how are you?
Yeah, very good, Dave. Yourself?
Good, very good, thank you.
Yeah,
Very
it's
good.
great to be on again. Thanks for inviting me. I always like talking property and one of the best brokers around. So yeah,
Oh,
I'm
thank
looking
you.
forward to
Thank
it.
you. You know, I think we just we like to have a yarn. Let's put it that way, right? And just with the conversation that I have you from time to time, you got so much wisdom. I just thought if I can record every session of our conversation, mate, people will be killing it if they just listen to what we spoke about, right? So that's why I thought
No,
makes perfect sense to bring you on. And our last episode it was very very popular as well. People have been asking me when you're going to bring Steve back on again. So.
we're both going to get big heads the way we're going. So yeah, but if people can, the way I kind of see it is, we talk property. If people can get sort of some takeaways out of that, then it motivates them to start taking action. That's all a good thing. So
That's
yeah,
all.
yeah,
That's all
yeah.
I need,
So
mate. Yeah,
pumped
good
about
on
this
you.
one.
And thank you for
Mm.
joining us again as well. Look, so what we want to touch on today really is a couple of Melbourne suburbs, because I think Melbourne's currently the buzzword. Let's put it that way. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not quite hot market as yet, but I'm sure as Steve, you would be able to share with our audience that yes, some of the suburb is starting to get really competitive at the moment. It's heating up right now. So this is the time to be getting into the Melbourne market before everyone else does, before more interest rate drops whatsoever. So what we're trying to do here today is we're trying to give our listeners free suburbs that's around the 600 to 700K purchase price mark, because that is, in our opinion, the sweet spot in terms of balancing the yield as well as future capital growth. So, Steve, that's what I think, Steve's done a lot of preparation today in regards to this. And so, we'll dive straight into the suburbs. Steve, what do you say?
Yeah, no, excited to. And I mean, if I just set the scene with Melbourne a little bit, and I'm sure people already know this, and anyone who's kind of heard me talk about it, the price gap between Sydney and Melbourne, like Melbourne's trading at a 41% discount, which is
Mm,
the widest the gap's been in 30 years, almost ever. So when we sort of see these sort of, kind of like it's mean reversion essentially. It's like that elastic band's being stretched. And so that's where there's a lot of value. And we can talk about the technical part of it, but really Melbourne's cheap. And if we keep hearing, we're talking about before coming on air, we're looking at kind of rentals, kind of rents, rental crisis and kind of housing affordability. Well, when we get into the three suburbs, and it's just three, there's a number of other ones who we can actually sort of see what's happening. And I think it's just part of the cycle. People go where there's affordability. And when we're talking about one of the world famous city in the world, and the world's most livable city for several years in a row, and second biggest in Australia, you can see the value play here. So I'm
absolutely.
really pumped to get into it. And yeah, and like it's quite fun. Like the thing I say to quite a lot of clients, I'm going to be looking to buy for myself. I'm still waiting to get some financials done, but I feel like a kid in a candy store when I look at some of the suburbs there and some of the deals that we're seeing. So I think it's exciting for people.
Yeah, it must be getting you a bit itchy about those deals that you're seeing at the moment. It's like, oh, I wish I can get that,
Well,
right?
it is. It is. I mean, not before we go into the three suburbs, and this is really sort of seeing how Melbourne's going. I just had a quick look at the prop track data. I mean, Melbourne was pretty flat for the month of March, just zero
Yeah.
point 0.1, but in Feb it was zero point 0.9 growth, and that was the best performing city. But on the ground, boots on the ground, just looking around. So I can tell you that the places in the southeast, sort of like the likes of Frankston and Seaford and Carrum Downs, have had an incredible start to the year, and in some cases up between that 75 to 100K mark, if you can believe
Wow.
that. So it's like a light switch just went off, like in the second week of Jan, and then people just piled in. So I think I've always called Melbourne a bit of a contrarian play, but I think the secret's out a little bit with social media, podcasts like we're doing here, etc. So already we're seeing that area is on fire. So, but there's a few other areas where I think there's still a bit lukewarm and there's opportunity to get in.
That's right. And also, I think, don't forget that data is always a bit of a lagging indicator as well. So,
Yeah.
that generally reflects what, maybe 1 or 2 months at least as a lagging indicator. So what you're seeing now, while it's not really hot on the ground, it's very hot on the ground, but it might not necessarily reflect it yet on the actual core logic Hydronic index or the prop track indexes.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a big proportion of data data-led investors, which is all good. And we do use data points ourselves, but there's some key metrics, and I can talk through that as we go on. But that data does lag. And if you look at a few of the major platforms out there, you'll see that Frankston's still flat, and anyone who's been looking at, there's a few videos that we posted, etc. 50 groups at opens, and that's kind of what we're seeing in Brizzy 2020. And we know what happened there, 2019, I should say, in the likes of Logan, and before you know it, had that big growth. And so, and a lot in this, it's not investors, etc. It's kind of first home buyers and owner occupiers. So, they're coming back, they're seeing affordability, and we've been taken back by how quickly that's moved, because in November, December, it's still pretty quite good bargain sort of plays there. So it's amazing how quickly it changes.
Awesome. All right, well, take us away, Steve. What's the first one?
Okay, well, you probably, it's quite funny. Like just before we came on air, you predicted it, but I'm going to talk through an obvious one, which is Broadmeadows. And anyone property chat, there's a lot of talk about. And in fact, this might end up on a thread in property chat, like talking about Broadmeadows. I've actually ended up on there before, which is a bit of an honor, as I've always been a bit of a lurker, sort of during my time there. But I think Broadmeadows, for anyone who does, I'm sure a lot of people do know, but it's 16 k's north of Melbourne CBD. It's a very low socioeconomic suburb. And there's sort of there's I would say there's decent pockets and really bad pockets. But why I really like this area is obviously you're very close to the CBD there. Land values alone are around that 500,000 mark for, say, a 600 square meter plot, maybe a little bit more. And so you're sometimes, some of the deals that we picked up at the end of last year, like that mid 500s. But you're kind of looking around that 600 mark. There's been a lot of development in Broadmeadows, and in fact, the Victoria Premier's announced, I think it was back in October, November, that there's about 20 neighbourhood activity centres in Melbourne, which are going to be up for rezoning, and some infrastructure spend going in there. Broadie's one of them. And so we should see some zoning changes around that sort of kind of train station area. And so I think that's going to bode well, So the kind of investment play I see with Broadmeadows, it's not kind of like you're buying in the best street and you're going to sell on to sort of like an owner occupier is going to be proud of that property. I think it's really the land value and what you can do on that land. And there's been some more town planning rules where the setback's been changed from 9 meters to 6 meters, which means on a 650 square meter block, rectangular, you might be able to get 3 townhouses on there instead of 2, but then that might even change a bit more. So there's a lot to like about the area.
So it's more of basically a very strategic buy and potentially develop type of play down the track.
That's what I would say. A bit of a land banking play. You're really looking at sort of when it takes a long time for areas to gentrify, and Broadmeadows. But if you didn't have kind of like these proposed changes coming in, might take a lot longer. But when you've got there's been quite a lot. If you go onto Google Maps and kind of look upwards, and you can actually see the amount of development that's already happening. Like new townhouses there are going between 700 and 750. And so there's a lot to like about it. And I suppose a word of warning would be is still try and stay away from those social housing areas. Obviously, you can still make good money in there, but the pocket in Broadmeadows that I quite like is that northeast sort of corridor, like quite close to the station. Not too much social housing there. There's been a bit of development there, quite near the shops, etc. So I think if you can get in there around that 600 mark, you're doing really well. And the rental yields are decent. I'd say so actually I can pull them up just quickly, but off the top of my head, I know the rental yields are around that sort of like 4.3% mark. Yeah, which is good. And the vacancy rate, just give me a second. As I said, there's a few data points. Obviously, it's obvious to look at. Is only 0.7. So that's a pretty tight market for Melbourne's.
Yeah, tight. Do you mind sharing where are the social housing commission pockets in Broadie?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've got software. I can share my screen, but it's probably not going to come out as well on the pod. But you're really kind of looking in that sort of there's two big spots. So you've got that northwest, the other side of the train line, above Jacana. There's a
What's
bit
the
of housing
Jacana
commission
Street? Is
there.
that the Flower Street, that type of is it, or
Yeah,
what sort
just
of
I
bound
think it's above Johnson Road, that sort of area there.
up Johnson Road? Okay.
So and the other spot like is south of Camp Road, sort of like towards Glenroy. Glenroy is a lovely suburb, by the way,
Sure.
but just south, there's quite a high concentration sort of in that particular area. So
Mm.
just I mean, still like and it's just a kind of sort of percentage of sort of housing, but just if you're going there, just have a look and sort of little things that you look for is you don't want to see those kind of cars on the garden, sort of mattresses, etc., and see what you can find. But having said that, you've got schools there, big blocks, 650, and if 650 square meters,
Yeah.
and there's a lot still you can do with that. But I would still I do like that northeast part, north of Cuthbert Street, around there. There's a lot of value in there. It's pretty tightly held at the moment as well.
Essentially, you're buying pretty much like you said, the land value is around the 500K. You're buying a property for around the 600, 700,000K. The actual land value to asset ratio is very, very high, basically. You're pretty much buying the land plus the house for maybe around 100K to 150K type of mark, isn't it? So,
Yeah, no, that's correct. I mean, the interesting thing about Melbourne, like they don't actually give out a land value for the actual lot. So you actually just have to go and they'll obviously look at sort of like the plots that are out there on the same similar size kind of land that you're looking for, and you
okay.
can work it out. In Brizzy, for example, and you'd kind of see that. And if we go back to 2019, those land to asset ratios are pretty high, like around
Yes,
the 80% plus mark, and
that's right.
and now they're all around that. It's hard to get over 50 now, it seems. So yeah, I mean, it's almost a bit of arbitrage, almost like what you can do with it. So, and the way I look at it, if the house just burnt down and you had to recreate that sort of property because the land's worth 500 and it's a minimum what I'd say 450 probably to build a house now. So it's
Absolutely.
not saying that, but it's say 950 to a mil to actually reconstruct something there. So. Yeah, so that's kind of a bit of a common theme across a lot of suburbs in Melbourne. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think there's only one way it can go, and it's yeah, and I think there's a lot to do, and as a property investor, you can add a bit of value, sort of renovating the main dwelling, sort of as I said, subdivision. There's a few things to be cautious of. Obviously, we talked about housing commission areas and tenants,
Yep.
but some of the houses are really in pretty bad order, and so if they're on stumps, these like be very cautious with your building and pests. The buying laws in Victoria are very strict. So once you've bought, you've got the cooling off period after that. You can only really pull out for finance or structural defects.
Mm.
So something like stumping, for example, like it's 15 or 20 grand sometimes to fix those items up, and you don't get any sweat equity back. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a few things to be cautious of for sure.
No, very good tips, Steve. I think, yeah, that's definitely one of the important things to look out for as well. So
Mm.
I guess a couple of things from my side. If people are buying for potentially zoning, they're not the numbers don't stack up to be able to do it straight away, isn't it? It kind of makes more sense to be able to do it, maybe holding it for, I don't know, 5, 10 years, potentially hold it for one cycle, then look at developing. Is that kind of makes more sense from a numerical perspective?
Yeah, that's what I'd say. Sort of like, and you can make anything work on the back of an envelope. So it
Yeah.
seems, but
Yeah.
definitely I wouldn't be looking at doing anything just yet.
Right
We
away.
know that sort of the whole of Melbourne has been in the doldrums for quite a long time. So you really want to sort of like you're getting a decent rental return. There's going to be some maintenance costs for sure, but you really want to come back. And I kind of equate it. I think it was an investor called Monish Pabray who talked about how he did his value investing, and it's like shooting fish in a barrel. That's
Mm.
so rather than getting fish out the ocean,
Absolutely.
it just is so much easier, and that's what you want to do. You kind of when you look at West Sydney, for example, if you'd have bought there in 2010, now you can come back and develop that. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Whereas at the moment, like it might be a bit tight to make the FISOs work, but clearly as I just talked about with the setback rules and some of the other town planning stuff that's going to happen, Melbourne are actively encouraging sort of development in this particular area. So I think we'll just see more and more rules that come in and make it more favourable. So
Mm.
here we're just really getting a marker in the sand, and then sort of like coming back to it. It's not going to cost too much money.
Yeah.
We should see a bit of appreciation just because things are so cheap and people are looking at value. I mean, we look at kind of like 16Ks out in Brizzy, for example, like on these sort of types of land, you collect 900 to a mil now. So
Yeah.
so I think it's and it's an area where there's a lot of examples of development happening. So I
Okay.
think it's but one thing I might just add, like if it's your first investment property, I think there might be other options, and this is kind of what I've said to a few people.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, while I think there will be decent growth, I think there might be other areas where you might get a bit more of a sort of push, like
Okay.
when you get in. But I think it's a very good property if you've got a foundational portfolio and you've got, say, it's a number 3 or number 4, and it's going to be a good one to sort of come back to. I
Mm.
think maybe that's a little garbled thinking on my part. I'm thinking of the portfolio construction part, but I'm thinking if you, because the top end of Broadmeadows, it's very like the disparity is not as much as in other areas.
Yes.
Yeah, to manufacture quick equity sometimes a little bit tough. But certainly as a long-term play, a bit like what I've done in Loganlea with those properties
Yeah.
next to the station, there's so many opportunities. So even holding for a couple of cycles, you'll be laughing.
Yeah.
Or
Are you
one cycle, I
concerned
should say.
about the fact that Brody is getting a lot more rental properties because, a lot of investors are getting in? Like, that's going to impact the vacancy rate from a long-term perspective, do you reckon, Steve?
No, it's a very good question. I'm not as concerned with Broadie as some of the other suburbs,
Okay.
particularly out west, and we're going to cover one in a second. But yeah, there is a bit of competition there, and the interesting thing, a lot, yeah, having kind of rented in Melbourne myself for a little bit of time, a lot of the side by side townhouses are very nice to live in, and so we're in a suburb such as Broadie, you've got a lot of these townhouses up, and you can go in and it's got everything really nice inside,
Mm.
and the rents there for those properties are about 525, 30. So if you've got an old banger on land and it's kind of maybe not to that sort of level, like there will be a bit of kind of resistance on those rents rising. But we just talked about the vacancy rates being quite tight there.
Yeah.
At was it 0.6? Is that what I
Point
said?
seven, I think, when you had.
0.7, there you
Yeah.
go. And what we've found with our clients, if the property's priced at the right mark, it will rent pretty quickly.
Okay.
If it's not, then if you're a bit greedy and you're trying to get over market rent, then yeah, it could stay stagnant for a bit. But not too concerned about that from an investment point of view in Broadie.
Okay, cool. All right. No, that's good. All right, Broadmeadows. I like it. I like it
Yeah.
given the proximity, given the land banking aspects of things, given there could be cosmetic renovations, small equity uplift that you can do in the short term. There'd definitely be a good long-term capital growth play that you can have in your portfolio without sacrificing cash flow, essentially.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's a good.
Uh,
Hmm. Yes,
Yeah,
Steve.
there's a lot of different like you just said. There's lots of things you can do to the property, and then if you go one suburb down, as I just mentioned, to Glenroy, and we
Okay.
always look at a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Somehow, it's some very nice sort of areas in Glenroy, and nice tree-lined streets with quite expensive housing,
Mm.
and then similarly, once you come up from Broadmeadows, through Dallas, into Meadow Heights and Roxburgh Park, some really nice sort of
Love
houses
that.
and areas up there. So it's obviously got that stigma and that social housing, but that just kind of like there's just opportunity that comes through the back of that.
True. It feels like it's similar, very similar to Logan type of play with the rough suburb, but the yield isn't as good. But having said that, this is more of a land banking type of strategy. Having said that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Look at Woodridge, for example.
Yeah.
To your point, it's probably one of the worst suburbs I would say in the Logan area, but that's performed pretty well over the last 4 or 5 years. So Logan, Kingston, etc. So yeah. So I think that's a good start, and that's a good one for people to keep in the back of their minds if they're looking for sort of a little project or something they can do down the track. And yeah, so close to Melbourne. I mean, that's just insane.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, you mentioned there's another one that's kind of further down west. What's the next one? That's still a review.
Yeah, let's keep it out west, and so I'm going to go Werribee.
Okay. Werribee.
And so Werribee is a suburb, 31 k's west. And there's a lot of pros with Werribee, which we'll talk through. Some sort of cons, obviously, as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, I like the area a lot. There's a fast train line to get into the city. There's a bit of infrastructure plan to make it easier to get from the west into the CBD. There's the Westgate Tunnel that's going to drastically reduce sort of like commuting times. But the pricing in Werribee just is again so cheap, and it's a big area. But for people getting in, there's opportunity. And if we look at like the prices, just give me a second. The median price 602,000.
Mm.
So
Is that for three better or
again,
four better, Steve?
that's actually just a mix of like, it's just a generic for
Okay,
so that'd
housing
be a mix
median value.
three and four. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm not on realestate.com here. I'm on another tool, and it's just kind of amalgamated
A
it. But
secret
there's
tool.
not, yeah. There's not too much gap between the 3 bed and 4 bed. From
Yeah.
memory, I think it's about 3 beds around 560, 570, 4 beds
Yeah.
620, something like that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So
Okay.
yeah, but it's it's pretty well priced. And sort of like I mean, the average growth rate for a Werribee over the last 10 years is 6.5% annualized.
Mm.
So pretty decent. And when we look at the areas, it's barely done anything in the last 5 to 7 years. There's opportunity there, and I'm looking at those areas quite close to the station. If we're kind of like, let me always sometimes get my bearings wrong, but if we're slightly sort of northeast of the station, there's a bit of housing commission there, and it's a little bit rough. So I'd recommend not going out that way, but still
Okay.
getting into quite close to the station on the other side. You've got the big Westfield out in Werribee as well.
Yeah.
So decent plots of land, subdivision potential there, like we just talked in Broadmeadows. So you've got these same sort of opportunities there, and it's also got one of the it's got a zoo there. I mean, that's always a good thing. But there's a zoo expansion happening there. There's an expansion happening to the hospital as well. But it's actually got one of the best schools in Melbourne as well, in Suzanne
Right.
Corrie. So
Okay.
so that's always a good thing for an area. Like you're in the hills area, aren't you? From
I'm
memory,
in
David.
Hornsby. I'm in Hornsby,
Oh,
basically.
you're in Hornsby.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, I always think of the hills area where when I lived there, some of
You
the
used to
some of the
live at
best schools
Balco,
in
so yeah, I know
is
that.
so there you go. Yeah, sort of Balcombe Hill Select School. So that was always quite a good thing for the area there. Just some really good schools. So
Definitely.
it's good to have a school like that in Werribee is a good thing.
Okay. Yeah. So, what sort of rental yield would you be looking at to be able to get around Werribee at the moment, and what sort of vacancy rate are we looking at?
Yeah, so now we go on to sort of like what I suppose slightly negative to the area, as a lot of people kind of, obviously a lot of people listening would be sort of Melburnians anyway, so I don't know these areas pretty well. But for anyone who doesn't know Melbourne, there is quite a lot of land out to the west, and so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think the further west you go, sort of like the more land there is, but the rental yield at the moment is 4.11, which is
Okay,
pretty decent.
that's not bad.
So can't sniff really at that, and the vacancy rate is 1.58. So
Right.
we feels like we're a bit spoiled with Brisbane and Perth, like with their 0.4%,
Very.
kind of vacancy rates. But it certainly takes a bit of time for properties to rent if they're not priced correctly. So it's so important to get that right.
So
Um,
yeah, so people will need to be prepared that there's probably a bit more competition coming out this way. Let's just say, for example, if you compare Broadie against Werribee, Broadie with a 0.7% vacancy rate as opposed to a 1.5% vacancy rate, Werribee, you'll certainly be facing a lot more competition. So when you do your cash flow
yeah.
analysis, you probably want to work on the lower end side of rental return just to be conservative, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely do that. Yes, with this particular area, and sort of, and you're much better off going conservative. And when you try and get it out there, listen to the property manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, go conservative, because obviously the more weeks on the market it is vacant, that costs the cash flow. So
Right.
if you were then kind of trying to get, let's just say 550 or whatever, and and you would, and it might take 4 weeks, and then you're getting 520. You'd be way better off just getting it done. So it's definitely something to consider. And if you look at some of the surrounding suburbs here, you've got Truganina, Tarnet, and Wyndham Vale. The vacancy rate there is close to 5%.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of supply all around this Werribee. So you've got to be a bit careful where you're buying.
Well, that is leading to the next question. I mean, it's
Mm.
Werribee is kind of in these like the surrounding suburb that's still got a lot of valuable land that's out there, essentially. So, what do you think is going to be the main contributing factor to allow Werribee to continue to grow in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and it's again, it's a similar sort of answer to what we saw with Broadmeadows. I mean, you're still getting houses at
At the moment.
land value basically,
Mm.
and what I'd be looking for myself is something where I can actually manufacture a bit of growth myself. So
Okay.
there's a lot of older style properties in Werribee, and I can even put Hoppers Crossing in there. I think that's another good one. Whereas you look at those floor plans, and there might be, say, 2 living areas or whatever, and you convert one of those living areas to a fourth bedroom. Like,
Oh,
look
yeah.
at the laundry where that's put out. That could be a second bathroom because the plumbing's already in there. These
Mhm.
houses are on stumps, so it's much easier to reroute plumbing. So you can actually sort of, for not a lot of expenditure, sort of do a bit of conversion sort of to these properties and add that sort of value there. But I think what it boils down to, there's infrastructure spend, yeah, coming up. You've got that quick train line.
Yeah.
You've got like the Westgate Tunnel, as we talked about. Yeah,
Yeah.
getting speeding up times. Like it's surrounded by some pretty expensive suburbs like Point Kirk as well, and Williams Landing, and some of these other areas. So I think it's got a bit of everything in there. It's got the good school. It's got the big Westfield, good travel. So I just think it's very undervalued, and you can pick up a decent house on a decent parcel of land, again with that sort of development potential down the track. And I
Mm.
think
Mm.
again, another thing we are talking about before, property investing is boring. These are boring properties, and generally boring properties are the best assets to hold them, where most of the population can actually hold them. So, um, yeah, so I think yeah, it's some really nice streets and some really nice areas there, and it's a lot more. And again, we're talking about data points. A few data points that we look at. The owner occupier rate in Werribee is a little bit higher than Broadie and some other areas, around that
Yeah.
67% mark.
Not
So
bad. Yeah. Mhm.
that's what we like to see. And then the socioeconomic score, which is I'm going to not shamelessly plug, but it's an H tag sort of metric. It's something that I generally would like to go a bit higher than this, but it's 3, so it's not at that sort of price point, and having like it's a 3 out of 10, I should say. So Broadmeadows would be 1.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit more affluence in that sort of area, and that combined with sort of a decent sort of like owner occupier sort of rate should sort of see that area do a little bit better as time goes on.
And what sort of property would you be targeting? Would you be specific looking at like a 422 or a 32, in order to cater for the type of demographic that's wanting to live there?
I'd always say if you can get a 422, that's what I'd like to get.
Okay.
And as I just said before, if you do get that 3-1 one, like, and it can be converted. We bought one for a client recently, which had that sort of like value add potential. We got it for 575, I think it was. And yeah, you could so was it 10-15 grand to add that fourth bedroom, then you can do that yourself. But ideally, if you can get a fourth bedroom, the 2 bathroom, that would be good. I mean, there's some pretty. We're talking about disparity in Broadmeadows a second ago, how there's not a higher end, but in Werribee, prices do get quite expensive, and you can get
Mm.
properties well up into the 8s and the 900,000. So
Mm.
there's
Yeah.
already demonstrated, kind of area to move into for price growth. So that's another good thing we like to see in an area. And yeah, it is definitely, if you can get something, I'd say, that's not the finished article, where I'm not talking about doing the block on it or anything like that, but where you can actually just do a bit of a cosmetic reno, you can actually manufacture quite good growth and some really lovely streets in the suburb. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
Close to the
Werribee,
station, I would say as well.
there's a second one
Yeah.
that's for everyone to take away. Let's move on to the last one. Where's the last one, Steve?
Yeah, well, as you can probably tell, I'm actually trying to cover the whole of Melbourne and
You
certain
are.
pockets. We're going to go southeast, and because we talked a
Southeast
little bit
side.
about Frankston before, and everyone's talking about Frankston, I'm going to talk about that area. But I'm going to come inland a bit from Frankston and talk about Cranbourne West.
Cranbourne
And
West.
so yeah, so Cranbourne West is a suburb. It's about 50 k's in the southeast, and
Okay.
if we look at Melbourne, so a lot of the really expensive areas are kind of like east or southeast Bayside, and
Correct.
some really nice suburbs there, like with you got Glen Waverley and Mount Waverley with the school zones, ridiculous price points there, Bulwen, Kew. But when we come onto the Bayside, some lovely areas like Edithvale, Aspendale, these sort of places. But there's a lot of value in pockets like Seaford, Frankston, Carrum Downs, but they're over our sort of budget now. So still, I think there's quite a bit of value in that sort of area. But if we come inland, we've got Cranbourne West, and sort of like Cranbourne's a decent sized suburb. It's kind of like you've got obviously talking about the sort of different aspects, north, south, west, and east. Cranbourne south has got the power line, so I'd stay away from there,
Okay.
and east has a bit of supply. But Cranbourne West has a medium of 690, so it's towards the higher end of your brief
Hi.
here.
Yep.
But there's a lot to like about it. There's you kind of like there's the train line that goes from Cranbourne into the Melbourne CBD. You're quite close to the water. Areas like Carrum Downs have done really well, and they're out of sight for some people now. So Cranbourne West is quite affordable. There's a good percentage of owner occupiers in the area. We are just talking about at Werribee.
Mhm.
Here, sort of like we've got 75.9%.
Oh, that's a good ratio. Mm.
Yeah. So it's a great ratio. Houses on maybe on smaller plots, but nice newer sort of builds where nice and some decent schools there. So it's a nice area. There's a bit of social housing in the area, but not too much. That's more towards the Cranbourne side. But nice streets, close to the water, close to the motorways to get around. So there's a lot to like about the area.
Mm. What sort of rental return would you be looking at for Cranbourne West?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's actually one of the reasons why it's on the list. This is actually one of the better uh, yields that you can get in Melbourne. So it's 4.4%.
Oh, okay. Good.
And
Okay.
not to let the cat out the bag a little bit, but there's some sort of assets there as well. So we were looking at townhouses. But it's interesting. They were kind of in a commercial zoning, and they were dual metered, and potentially you could actually convert the downstairs
Okay.
in that townhouse, we might be looking at a 40,000 spend or so, and that townhouse might cost. And it's a freestanding, no strata body corporate or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
Looking around that 650 mark, but
Okay.
you could potentially, if you did the downstairs and created almost like another sort of apartment, you could actually potentially pick up an 8% yield on that. So it would rent for 1,000 to 1,100. We had it all spec'd out with the agents there. I mean, they don't come up very often, but yeah, the vacancy rate there is fairly tight. It's 1 second, 0.81. And
That's
so
good.
with a decent rental yield, we should see some rental growth there as well. So a lot to like about this area.
So what you're saying there, essentially converting the downstairs in a townhouse,
Yeah,
that just reminded me a bit like the high sets that you have there in Southeast Queensland, in Logan, where you can have dual occupancies.
yeah.
Can you have dual occupancies and can you rent them out separately in Victoria though, in Melbourne?
In this particular instance, you could I mean, it's a bit of a different thing than the high sets
Interesting.
um, here, but you can like just with the way these were configured, and because they're in a commercial zoning, you could actually
Ah, okay.
put down. It's just a specific sort of area. I mean, there's just for these particular deals, but you could actually. I don't know, put in not that it's much use to me, put a hairdresser studio downstairs or something like that, and and do that. But I think maybe the best use, and there's some examples on the street where people have done that, and but it's like you've got a 4-car garage. You might have to put up a line to separate the two. There's 2 separate accesses into the townhouse as well as 2 meters. So it's already kind of catered to do that. So
So what you're saying
yeah.
there is basically having downstairs to rent to be a commercial area, so rented out to a business as such, as opposed to a residential area. Is that correct? So I'm trying to
Well,
get my head
you could
around.
do either. You could
Do
actually
either.
convert it to like a second living area, so a second apartment, if you will, and they've got
Okay.
separate accesses. Or you, because of the zoning, you could technically live upstairs, and then, right, if you want to do buyer's agency, have a buyer's agency downstairs or whatever.
Yeah.
So it gives you those options or whatever.
Okay.
So if anyone says you can't get cash flow in Melbourne, you can. Yeah,
Well, in a very
yeah.
specific pockets, like
In a
what
very specific niche, there's
yeah,
only a handful of them out there. So
has to be.
mind you, there's a few other areas where you can get cash flow, but this is the best I've seen.
That's a great tip, though. So it's townhouse in Cranbourne West, basically looking at a purchase price of around $600,000 to $700,000. I'm assuming the houses around in these areas are way above that now, right? Would have been a lot more expensive.
Well, I'm actually saying houses in
Oh, you're
Cranbourne
saying
West.
houses? Okay.
Yeah. I'm just giving an example of like an immense sort of like opportunity. So if someone's listening to this and
Got
they're
it.
looking to go out there, they could find it. But no, houses, like we're
Houses.
looking probably around that sort of high 600s mark,
Mm,
and the rental return, yeah, is about 4.4, 4.5%. Like, yeah, they'd be renting for anything between 600, 620 a week.
very good. Wow.
So
Okay.
very strong. And most of these houses would have been built after 1985, mostly around that sort of 1995 onwards. So there'll be depreciation as well. So, uh,
What sort of block size
so
would you be looking at in Cranbourne West?
yeah. So this is why it's a slightly different play to the other two suburbs. So you're looking around that sort of 500 to sort of 550 mark.
Okay.
Most of the houses are kind of as you'd expect with these newer builds, like I'm not to say mansions, but they're right in the middle of the plot. So you're not going to be able to put a granny on there
Yeah.
or subdivide. Obviously, there's opportunity in some areas, like Cranbourne North, for example, has slightly bigger plots, as does Cranbourne. But largely, most of the houses are kind of quite compact, and just really good bread and butter. Like, bit of a tip, like if you're looking to get self-managed super fund purchased and sort of like you're looking in Melbourne because you want to get the capital growth play, then Cranbourne West is a decent area to think about,
Any
just
pockets
because it's a
to,
set and forget.
sorry, mate, any pockets to avoid in particular? You did mention around closer to the east side of Cranbourne West, which is more towards Cranbourne area. Is that where the housing commissions are?
Yeah. The closer you get to Cranbourne, so that's sort of like south eastern part. There's a bit of social housing there as we traverse a bit to Cranbourne,
Yeah.
but it's negligible. I'd say the more you are towards kind of like the Skye, Carrum Down sort of
Oh,
area to
yes.
the west, I think that those are the really nice streets and nice houses and yeah, it's a nice feel, nice vibe to the particular suburb. A lot of the houses are on slabs. Like for someone, I saw some, if there's buyers agents who watch this who've kind of been looking in Franks, and most of the houses are on stumps, and then we go into that stumping problem here. So on slabs, you've got pretty solid house. Potentially you could build upwards if you wanted because the slab could support that.
Yeah.
But yeah, very nice, nice area, and I think. While we are a long way out from Melbourne CBD, as I said, the southeast does sprawl a long way down, and there's a bit of land out, but it's not really developable. Towards the coastline, but
Yeah.
largely I think it'll hold its value. But I think there's a bit of value in Cranbourne North and Cranbourne itself, like different sort of plays, subdivision. But I do think like for a boring sort of investment, Cranbourne West is a really good option.
Buy and hold, essentially. And what sort of land values would you be looking at? Like, let's say, out of a 500 square meter block, how much do you reckon
Yeah,
it'd be worth roughly?
yeah, no, it's a good. I mean, the land to asset ratio is a bit smaller here, so I'd say they're really about that 450 to
Okay.
500. So they're still pretty high.
Decent.
But yeah, there has been a lot, a bit of land released to the south. But all around that sort of belt, like we're talking about Carrum Downs. But if we go round to Cranbourne, then when we come into sort of like the likes of Narre Warren and Narre Warren South and Berwick, I mean they're lovely suburbs as
Yes.
well.
Very good
High
suburb.
owner occupied rates, and yeah, prices are maybe 200,000-300,000 above. Cranbourne, but that whole sort of belt is really good.
Okay, so we talked a lot about Cranbourne West there, which is great. So you did mention and whilst we were on Cranbourne as well, actually just out of curiosity, you did mention a few different type of strategic play for Cranbourne North, Cranbourne East. Like, can you give us a bit of a sneak peek in terms of those areas as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'd avoid Cranbourne East a little bit. There's a bit of supply in
Okay.
that area, and I'd certainly avoid Cranbourne South. But Cranbourne North has slightly bigger plots there, as does
Sure.
Cranbourne. And so the subdivision with the larger plots, if you've got the house at the front and there's decent side access, you've got subdivision plays there. Um, Not that I'm a big fan of this, but if you're close to Cranbourne Station, if you can get a house on a decent plot, potentially you've got rooming sort of strategies if you wanted to do that and really get good cash flow. I think Melbourne, I'm not an expert on this, but I think Melbourne has pretty generous rooming sort of strategies. I think you can get nine rooms and bathrooms or something like that. But again, talk to someone else who does. Like, I know lending's a nightmare there.
Oh,
But re really for like thinking about Cranbourne West is, as I mentioned, like it's a self-managed super fund strategy. Like because the yield's a little bit better and the properties are a bit newer, and it's kind of boring, set and forget, no subdivision, no development, low maintenance. I think
yeah.
they're the options that are quite good super fund plays.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. Yeah, for those people who's looking at SMSF, wanting to be able to get some growth in the long run without sacrificing the yield, which is a good, that'll be a good play. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
exactly.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thanks, Steve. Now that's a lot of good insights in around Cranbourne West, especially the ones that where you can potentially develop downstairs as well. That's definitely an eye opener. I'm sure there'll be a lot of inquiries coming your way about that kind of strategy.
oh yeah, it's if we can get them, and if they do come up, I think I'll get one before. But no, they are. When I looked at it, and it was a bit of a no-brainer, sort of like of that particular, but particularly they went pretty quick though. So, but yeah, for sure, there's opportunities all around, so it's all good.
Definitely plenty of gold in Melbourne on the ground at the moment. And look, we've only just covered a very small minority of the suburbs as well.
Yeah,
So, we talked about Broadie, which is, pretty much buying at land value and holding for long term. Can do some simple cosmetic renovations to generate equity in the short term. That's definitely one that's to look out for, which is only about 17 kilometers from CBD, if I'm not mistaken, Steve.
yeah, 16, 17, yeah,
16,
very
17.
close,
Yep.
very
Okay.
close.
And then
Yeah,
on the southwest side of things, we've got Werribee, who's also a very content player. Maybe looking at more of a bigger type of block, older type of houses, that kind of stuff. Stay away from the new builds, which is more on the Wyndham Vale side of things, as well, isn't it? Or the areas around it. But stick to Werribee.
yeah.
Good train stations, close proximity to transport, good schools. Those are definitely primed for long-term growth. And last but not least, Cranbourne West, which is potentially a good SMSF type of play strategy where you can still get houses around 600, 700K with a decent rental yield about 4.4%. Yeah, with very little maintenance, essentially, and better demographics in general.
Yeah. Like going back, the social score there is about
Oh, yes.
4%. So pretty high from an HTA. Well, not about
Well, out of
mean
10.
the road, but they're like taking it like Frankston's 3, I think it is. So there's a lot there's a lot going for the area. We're obviously buying in at lower price points, so we can't expect everything. So, but yeah, I think you summarized that really well. And but you did miss out the zoo in Werribee. That's always a good thing.
Oh, damn
So.
it. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I don't have kids yet. One's coming, but yeah, not yet. But
Uh,
yeah, we are looking to a zoo will be a very important aspect of that infrastructure as well. So,
Yeah, exactly. So no, it covered well, and again, there's a number of other areas, and at different price points, there's good opportunity as well. So I mean, hopefully that helps a lot, and
yeah.
yeah, again, it's just good sharing what's out there, and just good to see people take action, hopefully, and get in at an areas which haven't done a lot over the last 7 years, and should be primed to do very well over the next 7 to 10 years.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing these, Steve. I know, like I know a lot of buyers agents want to hold their cards close to their chest, but you're definitely one that's very happy to share all the wisdom. And that's what, we all like about you. basically. You think that the information is available, and yeah, you're not one who's just wanting to basically hold it close to you, say, no, if you want to know these secrets, pay me. You're more than happy to give out these as free information, share your wisdom about the type of properties that you look into, tell people where to avoid, what sort of properties to avoid, and what to watch out for. So for that, I'm sure our listeners are very, very grateful for what you have shared today.
Yeah. No, I'm not just talking about areas where we've just bought or whatever. It's really these are areas we're targeting now where we think there's a lot of value. So I'm not someone who wants to go and just yeah, I just where we think there's value now. I think the more you share, the more good that can come of things. So I've always
Absolutely.
been pretty open about the growth play in Melbourne and the value play there. So yeah, if that helps people and it just kind of inspires someone just to go on, get a loan, get something bought, they'll do very well. So I really hope that helps people.
The only problem is now you're creating a lot more competition for yourself, Steve. That's the only issue.
Yeah, God, yeah, no, that is very true, and that's the irony about Frankston. Like, but I can't say I'm big-headed enough to sort of say that we caused that with the amount of owner occupiers and sort of like first-time buyers, etc., out buying at the moment. Like, just goes to show that it's achievable to get a house in a lot of areas in Melbourne at the moment. We can't say that in many other cities, of course. So
Very much
so
good. So
so
much good.
so yeah, so that's good that people can get on the ladder there. So.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure they're going to perform very well over the next few years.
Thank you. Thanks again, Steve. Look, we'll probably bring you on again next time to share some of the suburbs or more of the premium ones, maybe around the 700K type or plus. So, more of a better demographic, higher socioeconomic indicator on the H tag stuff. So that way, for those who is able to afford for a more premium type of suburb and are happy to take a bit of hit on the cash flow, I'm sure there will be a lot more suburbs that we can also uncover on that as well. So, we'll get you back again, Steve. I'm sure you'll do a lot of preparation as you normally do. So
Yeah, no, be on like there's some really good opportunities here, and yeah, sort of. I'm happy to talk through that when the opportunity presents. But like as I said, we do use some data prep, sort of fin prop techs, if you will, but it's
yeah,
really sort of like using that common sense approach to sort of investing. So hope
brilliant.
that helps everyone.
Awesome. All right. And thanks, Steve. And look, if anyone want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
So you can just our website's propertystrats.com.au. We're on socials. I'm on LinkedIn, etc. But yeah, my email's steve@propertystrats.com.au. Just shoot me an email. Happy to talk property anytime and sort of help you get to those goals. So yeah, no, be good to chat if the need should arise. Hmm.
Absolutely. And look, I think not to obviously help you blowing your trumpet, but you being a very established investor holding, over 10 mil of property portfolio is one of the best evidence to, in comparison to a lot of other buyers agents that's out there, because you basically do what you would where you put your money with worth at the moment, right? So I think that's important to work with a buyer's agent who has established track records, who has tried out multiple different strategies, and then eventually worked out what's going to be best for him at the end of the day. And look, for those of you who haven't tuned into the previous episode, Steve has very kindly shared his personal journey. So make sure you check it out from the previous episode as well. But look, thanks again, Steve. And look, well, I'm sure we'll bring you back on again, and then we'll chat about that 700K plus suburbs next time.
Yeah, no, thanks for the kind words there. And no, always happy to come on. Always like talking about property. I've just got to keep in the time limits because I can go off on one. But really enjoyed the conversation as always, David, and look forward to talking soon.
Likewise. All right. Thank you all. And until next time, we will chat to you again.